to another brand new video. It's a new year, 2019. I'm feeling it that this is going to be the year for this channel. I'm sure you're feeling it too if you support this channel. With that out of the way, today we are talking about smartphone photography techniques and how you can step up your smartphone photography game if you just keep a few of these tips and techniques in your mind. Now, there's no denying the fact that now in 2019, phone cameras have got so damn good that literally if you know what you're doing, you can get some really good pictures. And speaking of quality smartphone photography education or photography education in general, if you want to learn more about this above and beyond what you learned from this video, you should definitely check out the sponsor for today's video, Skillshare. Now, if you haven't heard about Skillshare, Skillshare is an online community where you can watch various classes across various topics, everything from graphic design to photography to video editing, filmmaking and whatnot. Now, there are thousands of classes and I personally think that it's a great way to learn a new skill and polish your talents. In the field of photography, there are various classes which you can take to either master DSLR photography and click better pictures. I mean, what's even better, Skillshare is also extremely cheap at around a subscription of $10 per month. I mean, we literally spend more on Netflix for crying out loud, and I've got you guys covered with 2 months free of Skillshare Premium for the first 500 people who first sign up from the first link in the description below. That's a lot of first in a single sentence. With that being said, if you guys do enjoy the video, be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. Okay guys, so starting from scratch, the first smartphone photography technique that is extremely basic and probably most of you guys already know but don't really execute is the rule of thirds. Now, if you don't know what the rule of thirds is, it's basically breaking down your frame into thirds, both horizontally and vertically, so that your frame basically consists of 9 parts from top to bottom or left to right. Now, what this does is basically give you 4 major points of interest where the subject, whichever you're shooting, well, it could be a landscape, it could be a certain product, but it would look the most interesting inside those 4 points or in and around those 4 points. Now, to do this, it's very simple. All you need to do is open up your camera app and go to your settings and make sure the option for grid lines, especially 3x3 grid lines, is on, so that you can divide the picture into 9 parts and then you can select the areas where your subject looks the most interesting. Now, usually it is those 4 parts which look the most interesting. However, you can try whatever you want, but this is just one of the basic rules of photography in general, let alone smartphone photography, that you must use. And since it's so much easier to have grid lines on your phone by just turning on a setting, you should definitely take advantage of it. Okay, so jumping into tip number 2 or technique number 2 for better smartphone photography is using composition techniques such as leading lines or guiding lines to help improve the overall feel of your image. Now, photography is mainly composing your image, and if you use techniques such as leading lines, which is basically nothing but certain techniques of composition where you introduce lines that will basically draw attention to the viewer of the main object in the frame. Now, I know it sounds difficult, but the pictures on screen, it is much easier to explain. That you can see that wherever you look, your eyes are guided towards a certain part of the image by using the composition technique of leading lines. It is highly intuitive, very creative, and you can make do with whatever you have. If it's a hill station, you can use those curvy roads. If it's a certain place which is very industrial, you can use the straight lines just by shooting the picture at an angle like that. So definitely use leading lines and guiding lines. They will take your pictures to the next level. And with that being said, let's move on to tip number 3. Okay guys, so tip number 3 is something that I've been bashing my head on the wall for the past 2 years now. It still baffles me to see the amount of people that click pictures with their phone in portrait mode but not landscape, let alone using the pro mode on their camera. So tip number 3 is that you have a pro mode. You have been blessed with having a pro mode out of the box. Learn the basics of photography and please use the pro mode, for God's sake. Stop shooting in auto because it's not going to help you improve your skill as a photographer. Neither does it give you control. I mean, smartphone cameras as it is have much less control compared to a DSLR, but to use auto mode is not even trying to get a little bit of control. I have no idea, I've lost track of what I'm trying to say here, but what I am still trying to say is that please use the pro mode on your phone's camera. Just go to your settings, see if there is a pro mode. If there isn't, there are a lot of videos on this channel talking about professional camera apps that allow you to access the Pro mode if there aren't any out of the box. So hit the card above if you want to check that video out. But the problem still remains. Use the Pro mode, learn how to use ISO, shutter speed, aperture. Apertures are fixed in most phones, but then again, to understand the relation between them, which I will explain in tip number 4, is to help yourself become a better photographer. So from today, whenever you whip out your phone's camera, it's either Pro mode or it's nothing. Use the Pro mode. You'll definitely have a good time. Alright guys, tip number 4 is understanding the technique of the exposure triangle. Now, a lot of photographers know what the exposure triangle does, but don't really emphasize a lot on it because it's basic common sense to them. However, for people that don't know how it actually works, it's very important to understand these basics before you go out and do long exposures and all of that fancy stuff. So basically, the exposure triangle has 3 components: the shutter speed, the aperture, and the ISO. Now, before we get into the relationship, let's talk about what these are very briefly. The shutter speed is basically how long the shutter will be open while you are clicking the picture, and on smartphones with your Pro mode, you can configure it to be faster or slower depending upon what you are doing. The aperture, on the other hand, is basically the opening of the lens, and this is something that you can't control in smartphones. I use a Samsung Galaxy S9, which does have dual aperture, but it's really not that helpful, and it's just not practical in the first place to do it on a phone. So we're going to steer clear of that while understanding the exposure triangle. And then you have the ISO, which is basically your sensors, your camera sensors, sensitivity to light. Therefore, it plays a role in the exposure of the image. So these are the 3 factors that affect the exposure. Now, what is the exposure of an image, or what is an exposed image? So basically, all these 3 components work together while you are clicking a picture to get you an image. And an exposed image is an image which is essentially well lit. Now, it's different from what is known as lightness, which is how light or dark an image is, but basically the relationship between the highlights and the shadows and the midtones, and to ensure that everything else is properly lit and can be seen in the image, is what you could say very roughly is an exposed image. Now, what does the exposure triangle do, you ask? The exposure triangle basically ensures that when you change one of these components out of the 3, let's say you increase or decrease the shutter speed, then you have to alter the aperture as well as the ISO to get the same result that you were getting beforehand. Now, to understand this in a smartphone, it's kind of difficult because you don't really have the ability to change the aperture. However, what I'm trying to say is that play around with the settings of ISO, shutter speed, to get different kinds of images in the same lighting conditions to understand this better. And once you do, you can use this technique to get really good images. Alright guys, so tip number 5 or technique number 5 is basically experimentation. Now, you can watch all the videos that you want, you can take a hold or write a note about all the smartphone photography tips and techniques and tricks that you know, but unless you go out in the field with your phone and try different things yourself, you will never find out your true potential. Now, I've always stressed on this point a lot because I look at photography more than just being a mechanical process. It's a creative outlet, it's a creative art where you are creating a frame, you are composing an image. It is very personal to a lot of people, including me, and it's something that you do and create yourself. So even though you can understand a lot of different concepts, the core concepts that are included in photography, I would suggest that take all you know, learn all you want, but it has to be you that goes out and clicks that picture and gets a different kind of a perspective into it. Indulge in your creativity if that's all it takes, but don't just learn tips and learn how to do a long exposure and then go and do the exact same thing, because there's no fun in that. You could learn it mechanically, but to do it creatively has a very different feeling. And if that made much sense to you, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Took me a lot of time to put this list together, took me a lot of time to work with Skillshare, so I hope you guys did enjoy the video. If you did, feel free to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, comment below your important photography tips that you use while clicking pictures. And here's a fun little thing to do: make sure you use the hashtag AR on the next photos that you click on your Instagram after learning these tips, and the ones that I like, I'll put them up in my story and give you guys or your page a shout out. With that being said, this is Anubhav signing out. I'll catch you guys next time. Until then, you guys have a great day. Peace out.